Thank you all for coming out. Many, many, many years ago, too many that I so don't even want to acknowledge how many. I chaired a South Atlantic Modern Language Association graduate student poetry panel. And I got all these submissions from all these young writers. I was a young writer too. And there was a young man who sent in his work, who I selected before anybody knew. It's one of my greatest, I'm gonna own that. I'm gonna be like, yeah, I knew, I told y'all. Now he's a MacArthur genius. So I'm just gonna tell y'all straight up, this is probably one of the hardest poetry readings that I've ever had to give. It's been a rough week. Augusta is not in good shape. It's not getting a lot of news, but it's utterly devastated. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life was to go into that campus on Friday afternoon. I was lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones, so let's just say that. I'm one of the only people I know who doesn't have a tree in my house at the current moment. But when you get to the point that you have to evacuate your students from a university, that's real. A couple days later, things started to kind of slow down a little bit with the work thing, and I found out my father was in the hospital with kidney failure. It's been a rough week. But you look for moments like this, and Derica's right. Poetry is what matters, right? It's what gets us through. It's art that gets us through. We turn to art in these worst of times. This particular collection, What We Missed, is another book that sort of comes from that background. I was set to teach in Germany. I'd had a 20-year association with TU Dortmund in the north of Germany. I was supposed to teach there in the summer of 2020, and then this thing happened. And so we shifted online, like the world did. And what was supposed to be 3 to 4 poems that we would deep dive into translating into German that summer and talking about the issues around translation became a 1.5-year project because no one wanted to stop. These were students who were in a seminar who didn't get credit for the seminar because the way intensive seminars work in the German system, it's by invitation, and you're there because you want to do the work. Not too many weeks in, my French translator here in Georgia, who's sitting back there, Anne-Francois Lelestek, who does not like any attention, so do not look at her, joined us, and she had the amazing, first of all, she's one of the most amazing translators I've ever met, but more importantly, she's fluent in all 3 languages. I can tell you that it's a little strange because I am neither fluent in French nor German, but to have conversations about how to translate things, right? How do we share across the globe? How do we share across cultures? And we need to figure that out. We need to do a better job of that. So the selections, I don't know, they may feel a little kind of where I am right now, but now you know. So since I have an empty refrigerator at home, cleaning out the pantry, New Year's Day, 2009. It begins when I decide to pull the vanilla bean pod from the sugar bowl as I am sweetening my morning cup of tea. Today, I return to the earth what I have taken, but have not used. As sunlight edges the horizon, cuts into the mist, I sow grains of paradise near the rose bush, scatter thyme on oak tree roots, sweep allspice under the porch. Parisian bon herbe, Chinese 5-spice, Madras curry, Hungarian paprika, these I swirl around me. Good luck for travel. The neighborhood cats, suspicious of my shabby robe, judge my unkempt hair. Mine is a cold but colorful ceremony, each glass jar tapped empty, then a quick puff of warm breath to shake loose the dregs. Finally, wanting something of sunsets past, the saffron I keep. So I have held two, one questionable, one not so questionable laureateships. This is about the one that I've always sort of wanted. I don't write in form a lot, but this is a Villanelle. Day trip. My friend Randy suggests a new post. Despite my lack of German and funds, I have decided to take a friend's advice and become the poet laureate of Dortmund. I expect to find myself on the run. Expatriates always survive by some device, despite a lack of German and funds. Will Homeland Security require a special form? Perhaps there will be an untold price for becoming the poet laureate of Dortmund. Such aspirations can't be the norm. Perhaps it's a kind of literary avarice. Attribute it to my lack of German and funds. Images of Eliot, Pound, and Stein overcome my common sense. I'm so easily enticed to wish myself the poet laureate of Dortmund. No doubt there will be those who are stunned. No one who knows me will be surprised that despite my lack of German and funds, I want to become the poet laureate of Dortmund. I'm fortunate that I get to spend a lot of time overseas. And one of my books is all about Paris. The year I turned 40, I went to Paris, and a number of life changes were happening. So this is actually written with Frank O'Hara and Mina Loy in mind. It makes a reference to Mina Loy's work and the fact that she has a poem about the prostitutes in Paris and how they used to hold their fingers in candle flames to remind themselves that they were alive. And it's in that rambling sort of stream of conscious that O'Hara was famous for. My Paris year, toi. Bruce Willis held the door for me at Chanel, a story that should stand on its own merits or lack thereof, except that later at dinner, after I regale everyone with my famous person's story, Martina begins to discuss the beauty of Notre Dame, the church, not the woman, except it's really about the woman, because what we're questioning is spirituality itself. And I say, even a self-professed atheist should be moved, but Andrew hears even a sock-wearing atheist. And we laugh, except there's an air of something unsaid, something perhaps about what it means to be moved. So Jay and Maria make a joke about coq au vin sounding pornographic, which we all agree, not being French, is appropriately French, except coq is cock in our language, the American sound being a large part of what seems illicit, which isn't the same as explicit, something we are all trying to be but failing to do, particularly exceptional when you consider that words are our vocation. If this were 1 century earlier, the men would escort us to our hotel, leave us alone with our prayers, head for Montmartre's Cabaret des Nuits, hold the door open for sin. Instead, I order another round of Kier, thrust my right pinky into the candle flame, shake loose my hair, find any temptation entirely my own. I love bookstores. Seems like a bookstore poem is a good poem for the Decatur Book Festival. For this one, I think you just need to know that it's about Dante Rossetti, who was the painter. His wife, Lizzie, was his muse. And he buried a manuscript with her when she died, and then he decided a few years later that he wanted it back. At the Albion Beatnik Bookstore, Oxford, 2011. And I'm going to pause and say that there are 3 of my students who were in my first class at Oxford in 2008, and it means the world to me that they're here. Dennis has just insisted I have a piece of week-old sponge cake. It'll go off any minute. The strawberry filling is a little too red, but I love his shop, and as I take the first dry bite, I hear a young man, a student in literature, the Derrida, a dead giveaway, say to an obviously smitten girl, all poets are whores. The scent of bergamot in my tea starts to soften my scowl, and I notice Rossetti's The House of Life wedged in the corner on the bottom shelf. As I pull out the volume, I think, really? All poets are thieves. Dante, I cannot blame you for wanting to repossess the poems, even if it meant disturbing Lizzie in her Highgate grave. You fed on her day and night to fuel your own fantasies, but wanting to take back your words does not mean that you loved her less. It's not the muse's place to possess the art. What I cannot forgive is your cowardice, sending Charles to her grave. It should have been you who pulled the worm-fed leaves from her tangled copper hair. What next? Loss. We do have a lot of loss in the world. If you ever get to London, one of the most interesting places that you'll go that no one hardly ever goes as a tourist is the Lost Property Office on Baker Street. It's right by the fake Sherlock Holmes house. Far more interesting. Lost on purpose. In the office of Lost Property on Baker Street, bins are filled with mobile phones constantly chiming and chirping. A black velvet evening coat hangs on a beach chair. Its rhinestone buttons cast life fragments on the wall. In one corner, an urn, half filled with ashes, I'm told, tops an overturned red enamel saucepan. On the glass shelf behind the information desk, a yellowed set of false teeth are poised to nip a marble Krishna. There are snowshoes, impressionist prints, a rocking horse, a clawfoot tub overflowing with books. I count 17 garden gnomes. I consider inquiring after the tiny silver key that opened to the lacquered box I got for my 11th birthday, the shamrock brooch my granny gave me, and my first amber ring. Maybe they turned up here. Perhaps I can reclaim long-lost friends, the years 1984 to 88, my mother's memory. Suddenly, I find myself holding a wedding cake knife, and I shudder goosepimply when I notice the engraved K. Some things I remember are lost on purpose. So I'm a teacher. I'm going to read just a couple of short teaching poems. This was a poem I was asked to write for a commemorative edition about Allen Ginsberg. We were all given one of his poems to consider. His is called In My Kitchen in New York. Mine is called In My Kitchen in Atlanta, for Allen Ginsberg. You do like to surprise. So the mornings I stumble into the kitchen unprepared even to put on the kettle, much less face the day, only to discover your naked body contorting in what you swear are Tai Chi moves. I grapple with your eccentricities, which push beyond the surreal, beyond the sublime, beyond what anyone should submit to before the sun rises. This I could live with, Alan. But when you begin to lose focus, criticize my bathrobe, scold me for eating bacon, mock me for not writing something important every day, I want to tell you to take it up with the universe, except I know you will. And ultimately, I'll read some line you wrote years before my birth, and I will feel the reproach meant for those you knew would be inclined to listen. Nevertheless, you're always welcome here. Try not to step on the cats. I do love being a teacher. I'm also a child of the 80s. So this particular poem starts with an epigraph from a very, well, depends, I guess, on your aesthetic, an 80s song by Whitesnake called Here I Go Again. I'm sorry for any small children who are here because I'm about to drop some language. Cover her ears. I don't know where I'm going, but I sure know where I've been. It's 1987, and my new Fuck You World anthem is Here I Go Again by Whitesnake, which I play over and over on the Sony Discman that's riding shotgun in my $400 cash 76 Mercury Capri. With a number of unpredictable and predictable accidents ahead, I'm shifting gears, windows down, cruising along the Chattahoochee behind Eagles Landing subdivision, imagining myself as Tawny Katane, somersaulting between Jaguars, thinking the height of success is having a rock star with hair bigger than mine stick his tongue down my throat. Today, I write with perspective longer than the fake nails I used to have. I catch a replay of the video on YouTube, notice for the first time that those boys, if you stripped them and shaved them bald, would fall heavy like Samson. And Tawny, I'd teach her to write poetry, dance naked in metaphor. But before any of that can happen, my brakes will fail, and I'll slam into an embankment, totaling what's left of my youth. And a last and very short one, which is the title that this collection comes from. I swore I'd never write love poetry. And for those of you who are young in the room, never say never. What we missed. The giddy flush of young love we've only glimpsed a few times. That evening in the museum when you gave me a CD mixtape, the likes of which I hadn't heard in decades. That morning, you met me at the Dusseldorf train station, bag thrown over your shoulder, arms wide. You lifted me off my feet, swung me a quarter turn. That night, we drank port until 2 a.m. and danced our way home under fairy lights. That afternoon, we cuddled close at the National Zoo, held your camera at arm's length, and snapped happiness. Each morning, when you bring me tea, I concede finding each other late was for the best. Still, sometimes I mourn the years we never had, even the ones that would have destroyed us. Thank you all